Dead Whisper, also known as simply Whisper, is a debut feature from director Connor Southey. Not to be confused with the movie Death Whisperer. This is a kind of 2024 art house deal with the devil movie. And it focuses on this guy who is a lawyer, and he is dealing with the death of his child, and he's not dealing with it very well. He is somewhat estranged from his wife, he can't concentrate, he's basically living in the bottom of a whiskey glass, and it's all quite depressing, and he's filled with despair. Anyway, he ends up on this island through manipulation possibly, or circumstance, and on this island there seems to be some type of supernatural shenanigans going on possibly, or is it just depression, grief and even madness? But we see that he may be open to an offer of seeing his dead child again, but at what cost? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's just talk about it. So this is kind of an art house movie. What works about it? There is some interesting visual styling going on. Even before we get to the kind of more surreal and impressionist kind of, is he really seeing all these things, or is it in his mind, that kind of stuff? The movie has made some stylistic choices. For example, it's a very indistinct time period. The characters seem to dress like they're from the kind of the 1920s, but we see kind of cars that are like 80s cars. There's a talk of and fax machines and things. So it kind of feels like this movie is trying to be somewhat timeless. It appears maybe it's taking place in the 80s, but it's kind of meant to be somewhat indistinct. So there's some visual choices there. And then when we kind of get onto this island, you know, it's almost dreamlike in its presentation. Things are kind of quite surreal. There's dark figures kind of just hanging around, sort of whispering and things like this. There seems to be some type of entity, this figure, this guy, who may have or may not have manipulated our main character into sort of going there and is trying to convince or tempt him into effectively surrendering himself. And obviously he's kind of reluctant, doesn't quite know what's going on, but there's stuff that happens. You know, there's some interesting visuals on display. The movie is quite eerie. It's never like scary exactly, but it's kind of has this eerie sort of ghostly atmosphere, is the best way I would kind of describe it. The acting, I gotta say, is theatrical but somewhat solid. I thought our main character emoted pretty well, and I did get the sense of genuine grief and you know, anxiety and you know, things like that from the character. And for a debut feature, you know, it's well put together on a kind of a technical level, I have to say. So what doesn't work? This movie, if you're looking at a narrative, there's not a lot here. There's not a lot here in regards to actual narrative. This movie is much more about just this kind of feeling of sinking depression and grief and kind of going into madness almost. And that's really what the movie is more interested in doing. Visually speaking, I say it looks good. We get a little bit of glimpse of more supernatural stuff, but it's certainly not a flashy movie. The film is almost like a stage play in many ways. It feels more like something you would see on some type of experimental theatre. The pacing in this movie is extraordinarily slow, and don't be expecting sort of people to act in a realistic manner. It's very much just about trying to demonstrate grief and taking advantage of the grief in it almost. But, you know, our character sees things that couldn't possibly be there. I have to be honest with you, I don't really like art house films. So I personally didn't really enjoy this movie, but looking at it sort of critically and being able to identify, I think, certainly some interesting visual aspects to this film, I'll give it credit for that. And I have to say, I think the movie succeeds in demonstrating the kind of the loss of someone and someone's grief and how they feel lost in it. Where I think the movie succeeds. And visually it's interesting, and I think there is some good technical elements here. But I didn't find this movie interesting. I thought there wasn't enough narrative in it. I thought there's not really a plot, and I have to say, even if you're looking at it from a perspective where can we buy into the character, not really. I get his grief, but then when something is up, I don't know, he just never really feels like he's a real person, and I don't think you're meant to think that, but I can't really just attach myself to a character if they don't act like a human being. And the decision to have all this like timeless aesthetic, even before we get into the more weird stuff, I think makes it feel detached, you know. So it's kind of a film where I appreciate the art. I wasn't engaged. Maybe I'm not the target audience. I wouldn't say this is a bad film. It's well put together. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10 because I don't think it's necessarily bad. It's just very much going to be for a specific audience. Have you seen it? What did you think? Please do leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time.